Okay, so we said we're going to do Birchos Krishma. It's interesting that this is brought down here. I don't know anybody who actually does this, but it's a very beautiful thought. It says here that large is a bit. Kodim Yotzer Ohr Yachshov Machshavto Hareini Muchadim Zuan Vichlo Es Atzmi Im Inun Devarchim Marayu. The person should have in mind, I am preparing myself and I am devoting myself, designating myself, to include myself with those who praise their master. So even a person is davening by themselves, nevertheless, a person's always have to have in mind, I'm not alone in this venture of praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We all praise the HaKadosh Baruch Hu together. And I want to be included with them and them with me, because obviously HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though individual tefillah is very, very wonderful, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to participate with each other and daven with and for each other, even if we're not physically present with other people. So that's what a person's supposed to have that in mind before starting Birchos Kriyashma, which is a very nice idea. And then we say this bracha: Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Yotzer Ohr v'Choshech oseh shalom b'reis hakol. So Yotzer Ohr mean Choshech is a very strange way of phrasing it. The word borei always means something from nothing. Yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing, right? And Yotzer means to form. After you have yesh, something which exists, to reform it in a different shape is yesh mi'yesh. Okay, so again, yesh mi'ayin is like you have to create first the clay, and then you can form it. Yotzer is the clay is already there. You're forming the clay into various different vessels. So here, first of all, we would expect borei to come first, because first HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to create something from nothing, because there was nothing before he created it, and then we would expect to say Yotzer afterwards, borei first, and then Yotzer. Also, it sounds like Hashem had to be borei Choshech. You have to create darkness. But darkness is the absence of light. If anything, the creation should be the creation of light. Yeah, it says here that Hashem created darkness. Right? Again, darkness just seems to be the absence of light. Why does Hashem have to create darkness? Let him just remove the light, and automatically there's going to be darkness. So this is something which is a very basic question, obviously, and the way the Dover Shalom speaks about here, uborei Choshech, Heiram Mefarshim shal Choshech shuhadei Ohr, and darkness, which is the lack of light. Lo yitachen lamar bo bria. You can't say that Hashem created it something from nothing. In the Medrash Rabbi Shimon Chai it says Choshech she'isbo mamish sibe bria. Darkness which has a substance to it. Is that there the word bria is appropriate. And that's why or comes before Choshech here. You also Choshech shu heder or the darkness which is the absence of light. That darkness existed before light. But it's talking here about the darkness of substance which Hashem created. So that sounds very Kabbalistic, and it sounds very much like the Choshech in Mitzrayim, where we know that it was something which felt tangible, as it had substance to it. But I would say differently than the Dover Shalom. I would say that obviously this is a metaphor, but when we talk Kodesh Baruch Hu, we think about Hashem as all light, complete light. And something which comes to Kodesh Baruch Hu is light. And that the Rav Hutner says the reason why even though it's just a metaphor, the reason we describe things which come from Hashem as illuminating, as enlightening, is because light is the least substantial. I don't know, the word element is the wrong word to use, but least substantial entity which you have in creation. In other words, it's a wave. That's a big machlokes of physics. A wave is a particle, it's a both, but it's a wave, and a wave is not really, it doesn't have substance to it. I don't really understand how light waves work, but I know that they're photons, for which they talk about when they talk about light, are not that don't have substance to them. So therefore, that since HaKadosh Baruch Hu has no substance, the thing which is closest to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, and again, in terms of a metaphor, not literal, is light. So in essence, before the world created, again, this is a metaphor, not to be taken literally, but everything was or. Everything was or. There was only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore only the or of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That pre-existed creation. So therefore, for Hashem to bring or into the world was a form just of Yotzer. He just fashioned, shaped the or, which was the or Hashem, which existed prior to the world, and made it into a new type of or, which is going to be used for this world. And then there are two steps, as we know. Chazal will say that there's the or of Shiva Simei Bereshis, the light of the 7 days creation, which Hashem saw was not worthy for the world, and therefore he put it into Geniza. He saved it for the world to come, and that's why we have on the 4th day of creation we have only then the sun and the moon created, which are the light of Olam Hazeh, the lights of Olam Hazeh. Because prior to that there was this different kind of light, which was the light which came from some other source, which was the light which was a much higher form of light, and which is much more closely related to that idea of the light which comes from Hashem. So first, actually, it was Yotzer Ohr. Hashem took his light and made it a light which is worthy for this world, a step down, and then eventually even step down further. Ubori Choshech. For the world to exist, Hashem had to create, again, this is a metaphor. It's very important to understand it. Not talking about reality, it's talking about an abstract term. Hashem had to create a vacant space where he is not present. In other words, if Hashem is present, and they're not just Hashem himself, if the Or Hashem is present, right, all over the place, so then nothing else can exist. Everything is Or Hashem. So Hashem, the way the Mekubalim and the Bali Machshava say is Hashem was mitzamtzem himself. He constricted himself, which means he pulled himself back and created this vacant space in which the world was created. And the Mekubalim, when they want to depict it pictorially, they draw a big black space. And that big black space is the Choshech in which the world is created. Now, they also say there's still some residual light there because Hashem didn't completely remove his light. And also, they talk about a kav of or, into this black circle, a line of light which comes into it and goes into the middle of the circle. And that light also expands. But again, it's not completely light because then nothing else would exist. So Hashem created this concealment in order to allow other things to exist. So it's like if you have so bright a light somewhere, it blinds you, you can't see anything, right? So then you have to put on filters or sunglasses or something like that in order to be able to see. So to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to be able for the world to exist, he had to create the concept of Choshech. Choshech is the real Bria in the world. Or is the Yetzirah, it's continuation of Hashem's light, which was always light. Choshech, darkness, is something which is a Chiddush. That's the Chiddush of the world. The Chiddush of the world is that there is darkness. And that's why it says at the end of the first day of creation, Vayi Erev Vayivoker, right? First there was Erev and then there was Boker. Because the first creation was not Boker, first creation was Erev, the concept of darkness. By the way, the word Erev is a very important word because Erev really means to mix together. Larbev is to mix, a taroves is a mixture. And really, when we talk about Erev in Hebrew, we're not talking about absolute darkness. That's Choshech, right? We're talking about that was Erev, which was usually we use the term for evening, Bein Harabayim. So the idea of Erev during the Sheshmei Bereshis was not absolute Choshech like it is today. There always was some form of light. Right, until presumably after Wednesday, when this was concept of darkness, which became much complete. But even then, We have the moon and the stars in order to illuminate at night, but there's never absolute darkness. There's always some light in the darkness. So, and that's hinted at by the word erev, which means a mixture of light and darkness. But again, the darkness is that which created, right? So let's say Yotzer Ohr uvore Choshech. Right? Because Baruch Hu created the Or is kind of like a continuation of the Or which existed before. The Choshech is the real creation. The fact that there's an area in which you cannot perceive Hashem. Okay, the pasuk is actually, it's a pasuk in Yeshaya. Kamar Hashem Mishicho LeKoresh Hashem Zakti Mitzera L'man Yidum Yizach Hashem Hashem is Yotzer Ohr uvori Choshech Oseh Shalom. It's interesting what's left out. Uvore Ra, right? We don't put that into davening. And then only after Uvore Ra it says Ani Hashem Os it says Ani Hashem Os Kol Eila. We could bless HaKadosh Baruch Hu also on the Bria of Ra, but that's something which we don't. It sounds funny to say the Baruch Baruch Hu on Ra, so therefore we don't address that part of the pasuk. But the rest of it is taken from there. So again, Yotzer Ohr Choshech, Oseh Shalom. So Oseh Shalom seems to be a strange thing to put in here. What does Shalom have to do with this? So obviously, the whole Bria was created with the word gracious, which starts with a base, to say that until now everything was one. Shem Echad U'Shmo Echad. Now there's two. There are many types of two in creation, but there's Shamayim and Oretz, Kedusha and Tumah. There's a tremendous amount of things, and Or and Choshech. So the idea of Shalom is what's necessary once you have division. The moment you have division, the quest for harmony begins. And the two things which seem to be contradictory, which seem not to be able to coexist, have to be able to make peace. And that's what we say, like by the Baka of Barad, right? When because Baruch Hu brought down the hail, so it says that it was a piece of ice was it fire inside the ice or ice inside the fire? I don't remember. But that the water and the fire made peace with each other in order to do the Ratzon Hashem. So that is a third thing. Yotzer Ohr, V'orei Choshech. Those are the two elements, two opposites. Oseh Shalom, and he makes peace. So it's not a forming anymore, right? The word Oseh means he makes it happen. Those elements are two already. He was Borei the Choshech, Yotzer the Or, right? Or Yotzer Ohr, Borei Choshech. And now the whole Bria is Oseh Shalom, right? Uvarei Esako, we say instead of Borei Rabba. We'll come to that in a minute. So so Yotzer Borei Choshech, Oseh Shalom. After we have the two opposites, in essence, all of the Bria is to try and bring harmony between opposites. That's why everything in Judaism emphasizes triads. Why triads? Because the Maharal says whenever you have binary, two things, they're separate. A triad means there's a third thing which connects them. So whatever connects the two things, you can have a line which connects them, whatever connects, but that third thing is considered to be the connection between the two. So twos are bad because that means they're separate and they're binary and they're distinct and they're not getting along. Threes are good because when you have a third, then that brings things together and makes them reconciled and harmonious. So Kadosh Baruch Hu is constantly reconciling Or and Choshech and all the rest of things in the world which are binary like that. He makes peace among them. He says, it's a little bit off in tangent, but the Achri Shalom says here, Isa B'Sifra Emes, it says in the Kabbalistic works, the Roy Le'Shei B'Birkas Yotzer Al Piso. When you say Birkas Kriyashma, so Kabbalistically, you're supposed to sit down while you're saying. When Sasi Smachlas ever met a Shir Shirim, Achri Shalom says, I found a basis for this. Hashem revealed himself to Avraham Avinu. And he was Yoshir Pesach Chom, was sitting at the opening of the tent by the heat of the day. Baruch Hu, Shev Avraham, you sit, Avraham, you remain sitting. Ata sima levanecha. It's a sign for your children. Ma ata yoshev ani omeid. Just like you're sitting and I'm standing, whatever that means. Obviously, because Baruch Hu doesn't stand, but so to speak. Kach yu banecha b'shoshi kotzel batei knesios u'batei midrashos. So it will be your children when they come into the shuls, into the batei medrash. The current Kriya Shema, they reach Ma. Heim yoshvim. They sit. Uchvodi omeid beineim, and my honor stands among them. My time, what's Pasuk teaches us this? Elokim nitzav ba'adas kel. God stands in the congregation, in his congregation. Akal shono. Harei the royal shei b'kriyas Shema v'uadim richo says. So it's appropriate to sit during Shema. If you're supposed to sit during Shema, we assume that the same thing is true about the Birchos Kriyas Shema. Now, why would one? It doesn't explain. Okay, that's very nice. We have a remez to it in the pasuk by Avraham Avinu that he was sitting down when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Omed Olav. But why? But why? What's the between sitting and standing? So we understand that when you want to daven for something, it's best to stand. You don't have to, but it's best to stand because when you're standing for someone and making a request from them out of respect, you should stand up. If you sit down, it's not a sign of how important the person is and how significant the request is. So therefore you stand up and you address that person. But when you need to think something through yourself, so then you sit down to think things through. I know some people think when they're pacing, but for most people, thinking is when you sit down. And therefore, there's actually in Hebrew, when you want to talk about learning something in depth, you say, nityashev badavar. Let's sit down and analyze this. Let's sit on it. So Shema is not a tefillah. Shema is Kabbalah Tzomach Shemaim. It's really me meditating, contemplating, understanding how I accept O Malchus Shemaim, the Yokem HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kingship. And therefore, it's to say it sitting down is much more appropriate because it enables me to focus on these concepts I'm supposed to contemplate myself. Even though I'm not saying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shema, I say Shema to myself and to everybody else. Shema Yisrael, not just to me, but to everybody, to me and everybody else. But it's not a tefillah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's not a direct request, not even direct, and not even supposed to be a direct praise, although there are brachas here, but it's primarily it is my realizing what Am Yisrael's mission and purpose is in the world. So therefore, the more appropriate way of doing that is sitting down. Now, it's not a luckily mandated, you don't have to sit down. But the idea of sitting is, okay, I'm going to focus on this and I'm going to think it through because this is much more about me than about my relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So actually, I don't think people realize this, that Kriya Shema is not, strictly speaking, tefillah. It's something which has to do with me, not with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now then he says, Osa Shalom B'chulei. Calling for So for thousands of years, at least since the Greeks, perhaps even much earlier, the assumption was that the world is made up of 4 elements, which are then compounded to make everything which exists, which are dirt, water, wind, air, and fire. So, and they understood all of these elements to be, again, in different proportions, what makes up different things in creation. And they also understood people's personalities to be in various proportions made up of these 4 elements in their abstract sense, as opposed to in a tangible way. And the word humor comes from the Greek, for these 4 moods, the 4 humors, which have to do with, again, correlate to these elements. So we know today that obviously it doesn't work that way, but all of the Sfarim were written before modern science, and they use the ancient and classical science. And therefore, you always find that they speak about Eish, Ruach, Mayim, and Afar as being the building blocks of creation. There is one way in which we can understand it today in a more modern way, which is afar is a solid, mayim is a liquid, avir, or ruach, is a gas, and fire, I don't understand this term, but this is the term they use in science for it, is a plasma, meaning it's something which is not really a substance. It's not even a gas. It's a thing unto itself, which is the fire is something which is beyond, above and beyond the other things which have at least some substance. So these are four, besides being four types of matter as defined by the early Greeks and most of the scientists since then, there also are four states of matter. And that way, that is true still today, that we have these four states of matter, which are, again, solid, liquid, gaseous, and plasma. Okay, so he says, they're all of the four elements. And these elements are opposed to each other. Eish umayim, fire and water oppose each other. Ruach and afar oppose each other. Wind and dirt oppose each other. So since they are in opposition to each other, if each one was constantly in a competition with each other, they were constantly be so to speak, at war with each other. So therefore, nobody will be able to exist. You have too much of one type of substance, one type of humor. So then it's bad for the thing itself. It's bad for a person to have who has these states of mind. So therefore, he made the midah as an attribute, a piece of the world, shalom ben hayasodas. So that all the elements which exist in creation should have peace and work harmoniously. And of course, the creation is so complicated, and theoretically everything should break down every moment. So that's why everything is here is in the present tense, right? Don't say Yotzer Ohr, bara Choshech, asa shalom, bara asako, because it's constant. Because Baruch is constantly recreating what he created back then. In other words, in the sense that everything has to be put in balance and kept in check on a constant basis. So the last part of this bracha, it's not actually, the bracha goes all the way to Yotzer Oros, but the last part of this part of the bracha is uborei es hakol, right? So we didn't want to mention what Yeshaya Nabi says borei ra, because it's hard for us to understand how to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the fact that he was borei ra. The truth is that ra is also good, because you can't have tov without ra. Again, you need to have the contrast and conflict in order, you can't have one without the other. So ra is also good, because without the ra, there can't be tov. You can't distinguish and won't be able to know and won't be able to work on being tov and not ra. So therefore, ra is also good. But this is something which is a very philosophical idea. So therefore, Chazal didn't want to put that into the Siddur that way. So they say, borei es hakol. He created everything. Everything means that all the bria is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, this contradicts the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks and much of science, again, for most of scientific history, held that matter was eternal, that matter was not created by God or the gods, whether you were a monotheist or polytheist, but it always existed. And along comes Judaism and says, no, nothing existed before Hashem created it. Whatever it is, Ra, Tov, Chomer, Ruach, everything is from the HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, and he constantly recreates all the time. So that's Yotzer Borei es hakol. So here, there's interesting in Iyun Tefillah. There's a fascinating discussion here, which we'll take a look at. Nodalako. Anybody who analyzes ancient history knows that the ancient nations, Asher lo fi aleim or Torah min Shemaim, who did not have the light of Torah from heaven, hadal, halach libam, and they followed their weak intellect. Umarei neim shofatu, and they judge things by what they saw. Kashes bono b'tevel, when they looked at the creation, the world, they saw milchamat midis. They saw a constant battle between kochos misnagdim, between opposite forces. Or v'choshech, light and dark, tov v'ra, good and bad, binustira, construction and destruction, havaya v'chilion, existence and annihilation. V'libam maya tzafun miseichel, and their heart was hidden from understanding, from intellectual understanding. Lavinu haskil achdus mikoram b'tachlisam, that there's a unified source for everything. They all come from Hashem. Miaru lachlit, so therefore they quickly decided sheushios misnagdos moshos babrio, that there are fighting, clashing authorities in creation. Asher tilachamna isha birusa, they fight each other. Each one fights the other. Milchemes olamim, an eternal war. Pam tikva yad achas, sometimes this one has the upper hand. Pam acheres yad hashenis, and sometimes the other one has al yada. Sometimes the other one has the upper hand. V'isazos amas hamidah, and this was the measuring stick. This was the way they measured. Lamod apia matzav haskolos am va'am. To understand, it's an interesting idea, how intelligent every nation was. Says, you know what? You want to understand what's the difference between the various different nations in antiquity? I'll tell you how to understand who was the more intelligent one and who was the less intelligent one. He says, Shir Badas, a nation which was more intellectual. Shasagosom Akefes Yoser, who has a greater grasp, intellectual grasp. And different the appearance of different things, they're able to link to each other. In other words, they could say, let's say, sun is light, lightning is light. Sun and lightning, perhaps they're one entity. They meet Bershios, so they had fewer gods. Because they come up with the god of light and attributes him, for example, like I said, both the sun and lightning. And then you had other nations, the less intellectual nations. So then they had many more gods. The other nations, Dal Yarbeh, the nations which are poorer in their intellect, they had many more gods. V'aparsim HaKadmonim, the ancient Persians, Haminu b'shtei rishiyos kolos, they believed in two broad authorities. And this is true today. There's a religion called the Zoroastrians or the Yazidis, which exist still in Persia, and they have pockets throughout the world. There's a Zoroastrian temple in Muncie, and they believe that there are two authorities which rule the world: the authority of light and the authority of darkness. And that's a very intelligent, says the very intelligent understanding, because at that level of understanding, there are only two authorities. And everything falls into one of these broad categories. Right? So the one which is the authority of light and good, and the second one is for the authority of darkness and evil. Where it says that there are two very similar names. One is Hormiz and one is Hormin. I don't know what they mean in Persian, but evidently they're very similar. So therefore the Navi here, who's talking, like the Yeshaya Navi is talking for Sigas Koresh. He's trying to teach Koresh, who actually who was not yet alive at that time. The Navi was prophesying that there's going to be a king called Koresh in Persia. And he's trying to explain to him that Koresh is the train of Shivas Koresh HaParsi Miderech HaToim, to take him away from the mistaken pathway of his nation. Shemel Kasher, because he was a good king. And he helped the Jews. V'amar Shakel Hashem. So he told, so Yishel told Koresh, Kosh Baruch Hu Yotzer Ohr, Hu Batzmo Barei Choshech. It's not two authorities. There's one God who made the light and the darkness. HaChoshech v'Ra, the darkness and evil, HaChorban, destruction, Varisa, desolation, Hanirim Ba'olam, which you see in the world, Ein Shachim Mishifas Ezem Misnagi L'Tzon L'Shel Kosh Baruch Hu. They're not drawn from the ambitions of some entity which opposes Hashem. Elakol Meitol Yisbarach, it's all from Hashem. V'asher Mikavanas Habriya Doreshes Es Kulam. So because the intent of creation requires there to be opposing forces in the world. The opposite forces act on each other, mispalim Ishmael, and acted upon by each other. The meat of a mishkal in a measure and a weight of a shear, and nerach in a precise way, umeduyak and an accurate way. When we pull a shneim, yakum dvar sholem, davar sholem. Shalom obviously is shlemus, right? So something can only be whole if it's made up, like the Barad in Mitzrayim, of opposing forces, which work in harmony. Zeu oseh shalom, shakel yisbach oseh shalom ben atov hara, shelo yavru chukam. He makes peace between them, that they shouldn't pass over their specific, extend too far. They should work in harmony and not overcome the other entities. That's why Hashem is also Borei Ra, because the Ra also is necessary for the creation. So the these examples here. Rikavona zera ba'adama tzorech tzmichaso. A seed has to rot in the ground in order for it to grow. Stiras binyan harakavus. You have to draw down things which have been break down, things which have been connected together, such as a building, when you want to improve upon it, when you want to make a new building. And death is necessary in order for the soul to be able to renew itself. And Hashem also kolela, and I'm Hashem makes all of this. So that's what he said. His interpretation is, that's why it says by Choshech Lashon Bria, because Choshech also is not the absence of Hashem, the absence of light. It's something which Hashem created for the world to exist. The night, Chazal say that night is essential just as much as day. And in fact, the Rambam says most of the Torah you learn at night, because the mind is clearer for than it is during the day. So every night is just essential to creation as day is. He says here, gracious Rabbi, Gimel Yalkut Eov, Rames Tat Kachad, Rabbi Zechum, Mishin Bru, Yalkut says Mishbron, Osa Shalom B'nei. One front time Hashem created them, He makes peace for them. And but with Sadria Brachos, Yichlifu Tevas Ra Sheba Mikra, they switched out the word Ra, which is in the pasuk, but Tevas Hakol with the word Hakol, Lishlamai, Mishim, because it rubs the wrong way to say Borei Ra, so therefore it sounds better to say Yotzer Hakol. Kamina, like Gemara says, Ksif Ra, says Ra in the pasuk, Hakol, we say Hakol Lishlamai, more positive. Hashem makes true peace between these conflicting forces in the world. Everything is necessary for the Bria Kula in its entirety. Even the thing which looks most wicked of wicked. As the famous message says, Hashem saw everything He made. He made tov ma'od. That's very good. When I was saying the Bereshit Swab Pertes, the message says, Amar Abuna, Hinei tov zumida satov. Hinei tov would being good itself. Hinei tov ma'od zumidas yisurim. Tov ma'od means torture is good. Amar Abuna, Hinei tov Gan Eden. Just a tov is Gan Eden. Hinei tov ma'od zumidas ze Gehenna. Gehenna is part of Tov Ma'od. Shmuel Bar Yitzchak Minei Tov Zemal Chaim. That would be Nei Tov. Nei Tov Ma'od Zemal Chamaves. Ki Tov Nemar Bashkafa Pratis. Field says, because we just say Tov, it means a specific good, right? Avo Tov Ma'od. Nemar Bashkafa Pratis means everything is good. Over Zakol Tov, everything is good. Gam Advarim Shetabas built in the race, Mashkifim Pratim, even those things which don't seem apparently good, to those who looks at things in isolation and don't look at the larger picture. So the truth is that every religion, besides Judaism, has an adversary to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even Christianity and Islam, which come from Judaism, the Satan in both Christianity and Islam is a fallen angel who's an adversary of God. He fights God. And that's why the powers of darkness are associated with Satan. It's hard to understand that logically, because God is God. How can the Satan think he can fight God? But and he probably knows that in the end of days he's going to lose anyway. So it's not clear what exactly is going through his mind in these other religions. But in Judaism, we believe and the Chazal tells us many times that the Satan is l'shem shamayim. The Satan does what he does because HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, this is your job. So you have to go and try and get people to sin. You have to go and try and kill people who Satan Yotzer Ohr. All these things Hashem gave him as a mission. That's why it says that when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Shemaim, all the angels gave him gifts. And the Malach HaMavis also gave him a gift. Malach HaMavis told him, if you need to stop a Magefa, so go and use the Ketores, like Aaron did when there was a Magefa. And there's that fascinating dialogue which Rashi brings down there in Baloscha, right? Aaron comes to the Ketores and says to Malach HaMavis, stop. Malach HaMavis says, why should I stop? I'm doing Ratzon Hashem. Hashem wants me to bring a plague. So Aaron says, I don't know. But Moshe Rabbeinu told me to tell you stop. And Moshe doesn't do anything unless HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, unless the HaKadosh Baruch Hu told it to, agreed with whatever it is. And then they go back to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu says, yes, you have to stop. And the Ketores evidently is what arrested him in his tracks. But the Malach HaMavis' kind of was, I'm doing Ratzon Hashem too. I'm not here to be opposed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm here to work for Hashem. So that's everything comes together here. That's what we say here. Osa Shalom Borei Es HaKol. There is nothing in the creation which is opposed to Hashem. They're opposing forces. But Hashem, the purpose of creation is to make Shalom, and everything should work together for the purpose which Hashem wants it to work. Okay, we'll stop here for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.